Welcome to the Stoic Art of Living. I'm genuinely glad you're here, because what we're about to talk about could completely change the way you see yourself and the way others see you. See, truly intelligent men, the kind who command respect without ever demanding it, they carry a secret. It's not about knowing every answer in the room or being able to name every capital on the map. Their secret power runs much deeper. It's in knowing when to stay silent, because sometimes what you don't say says more about you than any clever quote ever could. I've spent years observing people, both through the timeless lens of Stoic philosophy and through countless hours sitting in coffee shops, quietly watching human nature unfold in real time. And let me tell you, the wisest men I've ever met, the ones who truly stand out, they all share one simple trait: they don't waste words. They don't rush to fill silence. They don't speak just to be heard. And above all, they never say things that chip away at their credibility. Today, we're going to talk about 7 things intelligent men never say. Not because they're perfect or flawless, no man is, but because they've learned, often through painful experience, that some words lead nowhere good. So stay with me, and if you're serious about becoming wiser, calmer, and more respected, hit that subscribe button and let's get wiser together. Number 1. I already know that. It's a phrase that slips out more often than we'd like to admit. I already know that. It sounds harmless, even confident, but what it really reveals is something far less flattering: a closed mind. And an intelligent man knows better. He understands that the moment you convince yourself there's nothing more to learn, you've slammed the door on growth. I learned this the hard way years ago. I was working with a mentor, the kind of man whose presence carried quiet authority. He had this calm, grounded energy that came from surviving enough battles to no longer need to prove anything. We were reviewing a process I had done 100 times before. He began explaining something about it, something small, something I thought I already understood, and without thinking, I cut him off. "Yeah, I know that already." He paused, looked at me, didn't scold, didn't correct, just gave me this calm, heavy look and moved on. That night, it hit me. I hadn't just interrupted him, I had robbed myself. I'd closed the door on an opportunity to see something from his eyes. His years of experience had taught him things that weren't written in any manual, things you couldn't find in a training video. Lessons only time and hardship could teach. When we say, "I already know that," what we're really saying is, "I have nothing left to learn." That's not intelligence. That's arrogance. Arrogance dressed up as competence. And Stoic philosophy cuts straight through that illusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything." What he meant was simple, but powerful. The ego, that little voice inside that wants to seem smart, to seem capable, to protect the image we've built, it becomes the wall that blocks our growth. It convinces us we're standing on solid ground, when in truth, we're just balancing on pride. Truly intelligent men understand something most people never will. Knowledge isn't a destination, it's a practice, it's a posture. It's not about saying, "I already know." It's about asking, "What else can I learn here?" Because when you live with that kind of curiosity, every person becomes a teacher, every mistake becomes a lesson, and every silence becomes a chance to grow. The man who listens learns twice. The man who interrupts learns nothing. So the next time your pride whispers, "You already know this," remember, it's not about proving what you know, it's about staying open to what you don't. That's the difference between intelligence and ego. And that's why wise men speak less, but understand more. Building on what we talked about in the previous part, true intelligence isn't about proving what you know, it's about staying open to what you can still learn. And sometimes the wisest thing a man can do is listen. Knowledge isn't a trophy you win and place on a shelf. It's not something you own once and keep forever. It's a river, always flowing, always changing. You step into it twice, and it's never the same water again. I once watched a seasoned carpenter do something that left a deep impression on me. He stood there quietly as a young apprentice eagerly explained a woodworking technique, one the older man had likely mastered decades ago. The apprentice spoke with passion, describing every little detail as if teaching something brand new. And the old man? He didn't interrupt. He didn't smirk. He didn't say, "I already know that." He nodded. He asked thoughtful questions. And when the apprentice finished, he smiled and said, "Thanks for showing me that." Later, I asked him why. Why didn't he just tell the kid he already knew all of that? He looked at me, smiled gently, and said, "Because sometimes you learn more by listening to the way someone else sees it." That is wisdom. And it's a form of intelligence that doesn't need to prove itself. It's quiet. It's humble. It listens more than it speaks. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "I've heard this before," take a breath and listen anyway. Not to humor someone, not to pretend, but because in every conversation there's always a chance you'll catch something new, a small detail, a different angle, a subtle nuance that deepens your understanding. And even if you don't, you still gain something priceless: humility. You practice patience, you show respect, and over time that quiet respect makes you the kind of person others actually want to listen to. In Stoicism, this is what we call mastery of the self. It's the strength to set aside pride in favor of clarity. It's the courage to remain a student of life, always learning, always refining, never above growth. And in the end, that kind of intelligence, the humble kind, is the one that lasts. Because the man who thinks he knows it all stops growing, but the man who keeps learning becomes unstoppable. 2. That's impossible. Several years ago, I worked with a man named Robert. He was sharp, experienced, the kind of leader who carried the weight of an entire company without ever showing strain. But he had one habit, one phrase he repeated like a reflex: "That's impossible." Anytime someone proposed a new idea, a bold project, a new market, a better system, those two words would surface instantly. That's impossible. At first it sounded reasonable, responsible even. After all, who wants to waste time chasing pipe dreams? But over time I noticed something. Every time he said, "That's impossible," he wasn't describing the situation. He was describing himself. Those words weren't about external limits. They were about internal ones. His fear, his doubts, his quiet belief that trying might lead to failure. The Stoics understood this kind of thinking perfectly. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality," and that's exactly what Robert was doing. He wasn't evaluating challenges, he was imagining disaster. He was projecting fear onto possibility, fear of the unknown, fear of being wrong, fear of trying and falling short. And here's the thing, fear doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it wears a disguise. It looks like logic, it sounds like caution, it pretends to be practical. But underneath, it's the same old voice whispering, "Don't try. It's safer not to." That voice is the enemy of progress. Because the belief that you must see the entire path before taking the first step, that belief will keep you standing still forever. Stoic philosophy cuts straight through that illusion. It reminds us that the obstacle is never the real problem. It's our perception of it that defeats us. I've seen this truth play out in my own life. Years after working with Robert, I joined a project that seemed doomed from the start. The budget was tight, the deadline unrealistic, the team inexperienced. Every logical part of me screamed, "This can't be done." But instead of saying those two fatal words, "That's impossible," I tried something different. I asked myself, what can I control today? What's one small step I can take right now? And that mindset, that shift, changed everything. That project ended up being one of the most successful experiences of my career. Not because we pulled off miracles, but because we stopped letting fear decide what was possible. It wasn't the situation that changed. It was our perception. That's what the Stoics were teaching all along. When you stop saying, "That's impossible," you start discovering how much you're truly capable of. Picking up from where we left off, that project didn't succeed because of luck or miracles. It succeeded because we refused to be paralyzed by the size of the challenge. We didn't focus on the entire mountain. We focused on the next step, and then the next. That's the difference. That's where progress begins. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that single truth became the turning point. When a man says that's impossible, what he's really doing is declaring defeat before the battle even begins. But intelligent men, men guided by reason and grounded in Stoic philosophy, know that what feels impossible is often just unfamiliar. It's not a wall meant to stop you. It's a challenge meant to strengthen you. Because strength isn't built by winning every fight. It's built by showing up. again and again, especially when the odds are stacked against you. That is the essence of Stoic courage, not reckless optimism, not blind positivity, but disciplined persistence, the quiet, steady belief that effort itself has value. In life, we are often handed tasks that seem too big, too heavy, too complex, and the moment we label them impossible, we close the door on ourselves. But the man who takes even the smallest next step, one deliberate movement forward, opens doors others don't even see. That isn't just intelligence, that's wisdom. Wisdom forged through patience, effort, and endurance. 3. That's not my fault. One of the most damaging sentences a man can ever speak is this: that's not my fault. It sounds harmless. It even feels justified in the moment. When something goes wrong, at work, in a relationship, in life, our first instinct is to protect ourselves, to point out who's really to blame, to make sure everyone knows we're not the problem. But here's the truth. Every time we push responsibility away, we hand over our power with it. Intelligent men understand something deeper. Responsibility isn't about blame, it's about influence. Because when you refuse to take responsibility, even for a small part of what happened, you also refuse the chance to be part of the solution. You trade growth for comfort. You protect your ego, but lose your power. I saw this unfold years ago with a friend named Michael. He lost a major client, one that his company depended on. The moment it happened, he started explaining why it wasn't his fault. The client was unreasonable. The market shifted. My team missed deadlines. And to be fair, he wasn't wrong. Each of those things was partly true. But while he was busy defending himself, while he was focused on proving he wasn't to blame, the opportunity to learn slipped right past him. He stayed stuck, repeating the same mistakes, convinced that his failures were always someone else's problem to fix. What he didn't realize was this: by refusing to claim even the smallest piece of responsibility, he had given up the one thing that could have changed everything: control over himself. The Stoics taught that we should focus only on what is within our control and let go of the rest. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that's the key. Because the moment you say, "That's not my fault," you hand the power to change your situation to someone else. You start waiting for them to fix it, to make amends, to do better. But when you take responsibility, even for a small part of it, something shifts. You move from passive to active, from helpless to empowered. You stop being a victim of circumstance, and you start being a participant in change. In my own life, I've learned this the hard way. Every time I've chosen to own my part, no matter how small, new possibilities opened up. Maybe it was as simple as admitting I didn't communicate clearly, or realizing I could have prepared better. Even if others made bigger mistakes, that small act of ownership changed the outcome. It builds trust, both with yourself and with those around you. It shows maturity, humility, and leadership. It tells the world that you are not a man who waits to be rescued or vindicated. You are a man who acts. Because blame is easy, responsibility is hard. But it's also where strength begins and where real growth lives. Because responsibility is where strength lives. And the Stoics remind us that we are not here to escape difficulty, but to rise above it. And rising doesn't begin with blaming others. It begins with a simple question: what can I do differently next time? That's how intelligent men lead. Not by finding fault, but by finding a way forward. If these ideas resonate with you, let me know by commenting yes below. Your thoughts matter, and I'd truly love to hear from you. 4. I don't need any help. One of the most dangerous lies a man can tell himself is this: I don't need any help. It sounds noble, doesn't it? Independent, strong, like the kind of stoic toughness we're taught to admire. After all, we live in a world that glorifies the lone wolf, the self-made man who carries every burden alone, never complains, never bends. But underneath that image lies a truth that's far less heroic. The refusal to ask for help isn't a reflection of strength, it's a reflection of pride. Quiet, corrosive, and blinding. Pride convinces us that struggling in silence is a virtue, that asking for support is weakness. But in time, that silence doesn't make us stronger. It isolates us. It erodes the very resilience we think we're protecting. I was reminded of this while reading about Abraham Lincoln, one of history's most resilient men, during the darkest days of the Civil War. We often picture him as a solitary figure, stoic, burdened, carrying the weight of a divided nation on his shoulders. But what most people overlook is how deeply Lincoln leaned on others. He surrounded himself with advisors who challenged him. He actively sought out opinions that contradicted his own, not because he lacked confidence, but because he understood something most men never learn. Wisdom isn't born from isolation. It's shaped by collaboration. During the brutal Battle of Antietam, Lincoln personally visited General McClellan despite their constant disagreements, seeking strategic insight. He spent countless nights in conversation with his cabinet, a group famously called the Team of Rivals, because he valued their perspectives even when they clashed with his. That wasn't weakness. That was strength through humility. Lincoln understood what the Stoics understood. Self-reliance is important, but it was never meant to be absolute. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most powerful man of his time, wrote openly in Meditations about the debts he owed to others. He listed, one by one, the lessons he had learned from mentors, teachers, and friends. He spoke of how their wisdom had shaped his own. Think about that. The ruler of the known world, the most powerful emperor alive, did not pretend to have all the answers. So why do we? Why do so many of us still tell ourselves that asking for help is failure? That reaching out means we've somehow fallen short of being strong enough? That belief is a trap, a quiet, suffocating one. It locks us inside our own minds, where problems echo and grow louder. It convinces us to carry weight we were never meant to bear alone. Over time, that pride doesn't make us stronger. It makes us brittle. Because even the hardest stone cracks under pressure when it refuses to bend. The Stoics taught that interdependence, the willingness to learn from and lean on others, isn't weakness, it's wisdom. They saw community as part of nature itself. Just as no branch can grow apart from the tree, no man truly thrives in isolation. Intelligent men understand this. They don't confuse solitude with strength or help with helplessness. They know that humility is not surrender, it's strategy. So the next time you're tempted to say, "I don't need any help," pause, ask yourself, is this strength speaking or pride trying to hide? Because the man who can admit he needs support doesn't lose power, he multiplies it. And often, that one honest moment of asking for help becomes the very thing that saves him from drowning in silence. Because when we choose to walk alone, we don't just make life harder for ourselves, we rob the people around us of the chance to offer what they have. When we refuse to ask for help, we're not only denying ourselves relief, we're denying others the opportunity to give. We cut off the quiet, invisible thread of support that connects human beings to one another. I know that trap well. I've fallen into it myself. There was a time when I believed I had to carry it all: work, family, expectations, the endless pressure of trying to live up to an image of strength. I thought being strong meant never breaking, never asking, never letting anyone see behind the mask. But all that did was wear me down, slowly, quietly. The turning point came when I finally admitted to one person I trusted that I couldn't do it alone. What I found wasn't judgment, it was understanding. What I received wasn't pity, it was support. And in that single moment of humility, I felt something shift. I regained clarity, focus, and energy, the kind I hadn't felt in years. That's when I realized true strength isn't in how long you can stand alone. It's in knowing when to reach out and when to take a hand that's reaching for you. The Stoics understood this deeply. They taught that human beings are not made to live in isolation. We are threads woven into a greater fabric, meant for cooperation, for mutual aid, for shared endurance. Epictetus reminded us, no man is an island. When we pretend otherwise, when we isolate ourselves out of pride, we're not being brave. We're fighting against the natural order of life itself. Strength isn't diminished by asking for help, it's defined by it. Because asking for help requires courage, the courage to be seen as imperfect. It requires honesty, the kind that comes from self-awareness, not self-pity. And those two things, courage and honesty, are the hallmarks of an intelligent, wise man. A man who knows that carrying every burden alone isn't noble, it's unnecessary. So the next time you feel that urge to say, "I've got this," I don't need anyone, pause, take a breath. Is that strength speaking or pride in disguise? And when you do, remember Lincoln, who led not with ego, but with humility. a man who commanded nations, yet understood that even the strongest men need others to stand tall. 5. I'm too old for that. One of the most dangerous lies a man can tell himself is, I'm too old for that. It sounds harmless, even practical. Sometimes it's said with a laugh or a shrug, as if it's just a fact of life. But beneath that small phrase lies something far heavier: resignation. It's the quiet belief that your best days are behind you, that the story has already been written, and all that's left is the ending. That thought doesn't just limit you, it slowly kills your sense of purpose. It becomes a kind of surrender, a fading of the spark that drives us to grow, to try, to create. Intelligent men recognize this for what it is, not wisdom, but defeat disguised as maturity. Because the moment you start saying, I'm too old for that, you start closing doors that life was still ready to open for you. I once read about a man named Harry Bernstein. At 93 years old, yes, 93, after a lifetime spent working as a magazine editor and raising a family, he decided to write his first book. He called it The Invisible Wall, a memoir about his childhood in a poor English mill town divided by religion and prejudice. Publishers rejected it again and again. But he didn't stop, and when it was finally released, at age 96, it became an international success. Translated into multiple languages, touching the lives of people across the world. Harry didn't stop there. He wrote 3 more books after that, because he refused to believe that it was too late. He didn't let the world tell him his time had passed. He didn't let fear whisper, you're done. He had something to say, something to share, something to create, and he did it. What struck me most about Harry's story wasn't the success, it was the courage. The courage to believe that life still had something waiting for him, that even in his 90s he wasn't finished growing, learning, or giving back. And that kind of courage, that willingness to keep living with purpose no matter your age, isn't reserved for rare men like Harry. It's available to all of us, every single day. Because every morning you wake up, life asks you one quiet question. Do you still believe there's more ahead than behind? Every day we face a choice. Do we listen to that quiet voice that says, you've missed your chance? Or do we embrace the truth that as long as we have breath, we still have purpose? The Stoics taught that age means nothing to the soul. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this often, reminding himself that while death is inevitable, life's duty remains the same: to live fully, wisely, and with virtue until the very end. He understood that wisdom doesn't automatically come with age. It comes with awareness, with curiosity, with courage. Because those who stay open, who keep learning, who refuse to let comfort dull their spirit, they don't just grow older, they grow deeper. Growth doesn't stop with age. It ripens. I've seen men in their 60s learn new trades, start businesses, and mentor younger generations with a renewed sense of purpose. And I've seen others let regret and time convince them that their story is already over, that the curtain has fallen, even though the stage is still lit. The difference between them isn't luck or opportunity, it's mindset. A man who says, I'm too old for that, has already closed the door, but a man who asks, what can I do now, opens it wide again. Age doesn't disqualify us from living boldly, it equips us to live better. Experience, clarity, resilience. These are not signs that you're finished, they're proof that you've been forged, prepared for what comes next. That is the Stoic path, to keep learning, to keep striving, to keep growing until your final breath. Because as long as you are here, there is still work to be done. If this message resonated with you, give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Because every time I discover a new way to see life, I want you to be the first to hear it. 6. I'll do it later. Few phrases are more seductive and more destructive than that one. I'll do it later. It sounds harmless, even reasonable, like a promise to yourself that you'll get to it eventually. But the truth is, later is the graveyard where most of our best intentions are quietly buried. Wise men know this, often because they've learned it the hard way. They've seen how delaying what matters doesn't buy you time, it steals it. Every time we say, I'll call tomorrow, I'll apologize next week, I'll start when things settle down, we're gambling with something we can never get back: time. I once knew a man named Thomas. By all accounts, he was successful. A thriving business, a beautiful family, respect in his community. But he was always busy, too busy. He told himself he'd spend more time with his aging father later, when work slowed down, when things were less hectic, when he finally had the right moment. He postponed the fishing trip they planned. He delayed the phone calls. He kept pushing back the visit, telling himself he'd do it soon. And then one day, later ran out. His father passed away suddenly. Thomas was left with a phone full of unsent drafts and a heart full of words he never said. He shared this story with me years later, not looking for sympathy, but as a warning. We all think we have time, until we don't. The Stoics never sugarcoated that truth. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily of his own mortality, not to be morbid, but to sharpen his sense of urgency. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." That isn't just philosophy. It's a practice, a mindset that intelligent men live by, because they understand the simplest truth of all. The clock isn't in our hands. Time doesn't wait for us to be ready. It doesn't pause for our plans. It doesn't care about our excuses or intentions. And what we delay today may never come again tomorrow, because what we delay today, we may never get the chance to do tomorrow. That's why wise men act now. They don't wait for perfect timing or the right mood. They make the call they've been putting off. They take that uncomfortable first step toward healing a broken relationship. They start the project that's been sitting in the corner of their mind, collecting dust and doubt. Not because it's easy, but because they understand something most people never do. Waiting for the perfect moment is a dangerous game that almost never pays off. I've lived this truth myself. There were conversations I postponed because I didn't want to face the discomfort. Letters I didn't write because I convinced myself there'd still be time. But when I finally stopped waiting and acted, something powerful happened. The weight lifted. Clarity replaced regret. And I realized that it's action, not intention, that builds a life worth remembering. The Stoics remind us to live now, fully, deliberately, and with urgency. Later is an illusion, a soft pillow for the mind that keeps us comfortable while life quietly slips by. The man who acts today, who refuses to leave the important things undone, is the man who lives without regret. And that, right there, is true wisdom. Because opportunity doesn't always knock twice. More often it fades silently while we're waiting for a better time. 7. That's just how I am. Few phrases limit a man's potential more than that one. It sounds simple, even self-aware, but beneath it lies quiet surrender, a decision to stop growing. When a man says, "That's just how I am," what he's really saying is, "I've given up on becoming better." It's not a statement of fact, it's an excuse. Intelligent men know better. They understand that we are not fixed beings, trapped by our past or our habits. Who we are is shaped every single day by what we choose to do again and again. The moment you declare yourself incapable of change, you're not describing your nature. You're refusing responsibility for it. I've seen this play out too many times. A man loses his temper again and again. When someone calls him out, he shrugs and says, "That's just how I am." Another man avoids intimacy, hides behind emotional walls and justifies it with, "That's who I've always been." But these aren't truths. They're shields, excuses that let fear disguise itself as self-awareness. Because deep down what they reveal isn't confidence. It's resistance. Resistance to discomfort. Resistance to the hard work of change. Resistance to becoming who they're truly meant to be. The Stoics confronted this head-on. They refused to accept the illusion of being finished. They taught that we are not prisoners of our temperament, our past, or our impulses. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." And in the same way, it's not our nature that limits us. It's the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Change is uncomfortable. No question. It demands honesty, reflection, the courage to let go of what's familiar, even when it hurts. But the Stoics believed that self-mastery, the discipline to rise above our lower nature, is the highest calling of all, because growth demands that we ask the hard questions. Am I acting this way because it's truly who I am, or because it's easier than doing the work to change? Intelligent men choose the harder path, not because they hate who they are, but because they respect themselves enough not to stay the same. They understand that wisdom isn't a trophy you earn and display. It's a practice, a daily commitment to becoming a better version of yourself. In the end, that's just how I am, is a way of closing the door on possibility. But the Stoics remind us, life itself is change. Nature is change. To resist it is to deny the very essence of being alive. The man who understands this doesn't fear change, he welcomes it. He sees himself as a work in progress, unfinished but willing, and in that willingness lies true wisdom. If you've ever caught yourself saying one of these 7 things, trust me, you're not alone. I've said them too, more times than I'd like to admit. But here's the good news. Intelligent men aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who recognize them and choose to do better. That's what we're doing here, becoming better, one thoughtful choice at a time. So which one hit home for you today? Maybe it's time to let go of, that's just how I am. Or finally retire, I'll do it later, before later becomes never. Whatever it is, this is your invitation to take the next step. Because wisdom isn't about perfection. It's about staying curious, staying humble, and always moving forward. If today's message sparked something in you, share this video with someone walking the same path. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We'll keep learning, growing, and walking this journey together. See you in the next video.